What's good, y'all? It's your boy Money Man Mock, aka Triple M. Welcome back to the Money Show. We got some Destiny 2. I know it's been a while since I've been on this game and even made a video for it, but I've been thinking about what type of content I want to do while we wait for the final shape. And you see a lot of people doing the different types of build videos, and you see a lot of people doing typical trials and all this other content. But I did some build videos before back in the day, and I like, me personally, to create builds that are not only against the meta, but builds that are just different, and builds that allow you to be able to utilize a lot of different exotics and weapons that people typically don't use, just to show their value. So that's kind of what we're gonna do today, and probably a couple other videos, just kind of showcasing a bunch of different exotics and a bunch of different builds you can use that don't rely on artifacts and just still provide that same type of lethality, or at least something that you can use and vitalize in game and regular content. So let's get into the video. I got this build for y'all that's a Strand build, and you can look right here at the aspects and abilities that I'm going to be using. The first aspect is going to be the Wanderer, and you can read right there what it does. I mean, Strand has been around for a while now, so nothing new really has been added to the game. It's just what everyone is already familiar with, all the same aspects, the same fragments, all being shown right here on screen. The weapons you're going to be using is the BXR, the BX battle rifle, the Wither Horde, and really an LMG of your choice. Primarily your heavy is going to be utilized as your damage dealing weapon or your boss dealing weapon. The BXR I chose specifically because I want it to be used with the perk blunt execution rounds, and that's very important to this build in particular. Pugilist is also one that just really amps it up a lot more. So if you can get a BXR that's enhanced or has to work to craft it, then that'll be perfect. But yeah, you want to use that specifically because I think that's the only weapon in the game with that perk. So, and there's a reason why we chose Strand too, but you can really use it with any subclass. But continuing on, we'll talk about the exotic of choice, which is the Claws of Ahamkara. You can see on screen all the different mods that we have attached to each piece of armor as well. So the goal with this build is basically to just utilize your melees, and with Strand you already, for Warlock, have 3 melees stocked. With the Claws of Ahamkara you gain an additional melee charge, which gives you 4. And these melee charges really do a decent amount of damage. I don't know if people really took notice to that, but they're very powerful for just a powered melee charge, and they can be utilized at range too, which makes it great. Now, I mentioned before that you can really use this on any build, on any subclass, and you can to an extent, but I think Strand offers a lot more versatility with it because of the range of the melees, the fact that you have 4 melees. Every other subclass is going to only give you 2. And on top of that, Strand also just has a lot more support stuff that can help you stay at bay from your enemies and help you deal damage. So the gameplay loop here is pretty much using your BXR majority of the time. Your BXR is going to be your ad clear weapon. And what you're going to do is you're going to use your melee abilities as much as possible. You're going to use them to deal chunk damage. You're going to use them to take out red bars. You're going to use them however you want. And with the BXR, that blunt execution round perk, what it does is every time you deal damage with a powered melee, you gain dramatically increased damage, and I think it's range or something. But that increased damage only applies for the first burst of the weapon, or the first shot of the burst, I believe. But I mean, that one shot alone deals as much as 2 to 3 bursts of the gun in general. So you get a big chunk of damage, and you can take note of it here in a couple of these clips that I'm going to be playing. I got clips of Sabathun Spire, and then I also ran a GM with it. By the way, the GM that I ran was not the most optimal GM for this build, but I mean, you can use it pretty much anywhere as long as you're utilizing the strengths of the build properly, and you know, playing safe, obviously, because it's a GM, it's in-game content. You're going to want to prioritize your life. But the build was able to hold off its own for sure, and it really thrives in high dense enemy environments where you're able to chunk out a lot of red bars, able to shoot out those melees and get that increased damage as quickly as possible. But when you're in certain GM spaces where everything is ranged, or enemies are sniping and all that, it does slow down the gameplay loop a little bit. But other than that, the main goal of the build is to just shoot out those melees as much as possible. You gain increased damage. As you're using your BXR, you're gaining melee energy back because you have Pugilist. And then on top of that, whenever you're in a funk or whenever you're in a weird predicament, you pull out your Wither Horde, you get a little ad clearance space, you get a little safe perimeter around you that you can just shoot out, and Wither Horde, does area control. And then you pull out your heavy if you really need to chunk down some ads or if you need to do some damage. And on top of that, Wither Horde is also a plus because, as you know, Wither Horde is a great swap weapon for dealing extra damage to bosses as well. You put a Wither Horde on them, switch to your heavy, and then you just go ahead and proceed to deal damage, and then you get extra damage from that as well. So this build is, like I said, just something different, something that I messed around with when the season first started. And I kind of stuck around with it. It wasn't that bad. It was able to hold its own, and it's something different. I like prioritizing uniqueness when it comes to Destiny because there's so many things that they create and so many different builds and exotics and weapons that they actually take the time to put in the game. But to their own fault, it's hard to use some of those weapons sometimes because of the fact that there are so many other things in the game that are just that much better, that are just that much more powerful. And then when you get involved with the artifacts, everything becomes 10 times as powerful, like Peloria's Lance or Sunshot and things like that. So, I mean, they do make a lot of good things, but it's just hard for those things to shine sometimes because of just the state of the game, really, and just how balancing works and how the flow of the seasons go. But I try to shine light on some of those builds and some of those weapons as much as I can. So I'll probably turn this into a little series. And I got a couple of them for each character. So I'll probably do some for Titan. I got some for Hunter for sure. And I'll just keep on bringing out these videos, and hopefully you guys like these builds, and then we'll kind of build on it and see where it goes from there. But I'm gonna let the rest of this GM gameplay ride out, and then if you guys got a specific build in the comments that you want to talk about, I can make a video on it. If you think there's a way that this build can be better or improved, leave a comment on that too, and I'll be sure to check that out. But hopefully you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Deuces.